Right then.
We're live. Hello, this is exciting.
Yes, this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yes, this is a Primal retrospective from two people that worked on Primal, two people representing many other people that many other
Yeah.
talented people that made a game back in the early 2000s. Andy, do you want to introduce yourself? People might know
Yeah.
me from my podcast. I'm Alex. I was a designer on Primal. It was actually the first game I was a proper design, a professional designer on. Andy, what about you?
Yeah, well, I was junior artist on the project at the time before moving into like cinematics and stuff like that. So we sat across from each other
We did.
for until I moved upstairs. We
Yes.
sat across from each other for a long period of time. So and I think we started around the same time, which is kind of where I wanted to start today because the reason for doing this is because it's the 23rd anniversary. I mean, if I'd let my beard grow, well, I equally have as much grey in there as you do, but
Yes. I do not look like I did when Primal started, that's for sure.
it's crazy. Like 23 years ago, like we're both in the games industry still, right? So in some ways, it feels like we've only done a certain number of projects in that time, so it feels short. But then just before we went live, we were talking about like kids and stuff like that, and like time has changed. Like we're getting weird injuries and stuff now.
Some more than others, unfortunately, it appears.
Exactly. So yeah, I've got a load of stuff written down about basically uh, going over the development of the game, kind of the impact it's had like since then. A load of souvenirs that we both have, I believe. Kind of what the fan. We've got some fan questions as well. Fans? What? Still in 2026? As well as like yeah, some little kind of souvenirs and what we did after Primal, just as it ended. So I guess let's start with I joined the project when it had just started, I believe. So I don't know how you started on the project. How did you join Sony Cambridge and then start on Primal?
That's a funny story. So I joined as a tester in 97, worked on Frogger, Beast Wars, Medieval 2. And then, like, I guess it must have been, so it must have been like 99, 2000, I guess, when Primal spun up. We got PS2 dev kits into the building. And they were all locked away in a secret room upstairs where they started to do the early development of what landscapes and worlds would look like on PS2.
Mhm.
And around the same sort of time, the whole QA department was shut down. So I think there was like five of us in QA at the point, and we were all let
Wasn't
go.
wasn't C12 being worked on?
Yeah, sorry, C12. Yeah, C12 had come out. I'm pretty sure C12 had come out, or maybe there was some overlap there. Maybe but they basically decided they didn't want internal QA anymore. So there was about five of us in QA. We were all going to be let go, but the creative director of Primal, who was also the creative director of Medieval 1 and 2, Chris Sorrell, he basically saved my neck. He was basically like, "Hey, don't let him go. Let's make him a designer. If we made him a designer, could he stay on?" And the boss of the studio at the time, sadly, now, actually, was that Ian? I can't remember if Ian Saunter
There
was the
was yeah,
boss. He
there was a
was, I
guy
think.
before I joined that people still talked about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who just passed away, unfortunately, a few years
Oh
ago.
God.
Yeah, so I think Ian Saunter was the boss at the time, and he said, "Go for it." Yeah, great. So they basically saved me from losing my job, and I became a designer on Primal, which was probably around 2000, I would guess. Um,
That and QA to design is a is a path for many designers, right? Still to
It's
this day.
very common, yeah, and I think I was internal QA because I was on site, right? So QA can sometimes be internal, where you're actually in the building with the developers, or external, where you're in a large QA house and the games come to you, but the developer is somewhere else. Being an internal QA like I was awesome because I got to be right next to I could literally find a bug, go downstairs, talk to the engineer, and go, "How did this happen?" And through osmosis, I was kind of learning how games were made. It's a brilliant way to learn how games are made and all the disciplines work. So I think that put me in a good position. Plus, I was a massive gamer. I was one of the there were lots of us at the studio that were big gamers. I was definitely one of them, and so that sort of combination, I think, of being technically savvy. I was leading QA at that point. I was basically lead QA on Medieval 2, and And I guess I showed something that Chris thought would work well for design, and luckily he went out on a limb and saved me, and I'm glad he did.
So much of what I think the title for this video should be "What Were We Thinking?" Because I think on most of the things that we did, looking back, what the hell were we thinking like of doing that? So, and I guess it starts with the kind of the concept of Primal. Those games that you mentioned, C12 was a shooter, Medieval was a third person action adventure kind of roaming. Okay. So there's a little bit of knowledge there or technical stuff, but on the PlayStation 2 that was all completely brand new, right? So
It was, and I think the Medieval 2 through line is the one to follow, right? Because Chris was very much the heart of Primal. What Medieval, James Pond, he's very famous for for making James Pond, the James Pond series, into Medieval 2, and then Primal was very much like he wanted to make a big, take advantage of PS2 and build a really, modern adventure game, action adventure game on PlayStation 2.
so when I joined, yeah, it was kind of like it was in production. Like I remember it was still called Pentacles at the time, the first realm,
Oh
Solum.
wow, flashback.
You forgot
Yeah.
that name, yeah?
I
See, this is
remember.
this is what it's going to be like for an hour, right? So it was still called Pentacles. We didn't have a Gen design. Like Gen was still being designed. The Scree did exist, but beyond that, it was still what I mean, looking back, I don't know when we kind of started production or not. I believe production had basically started when I joined because there was already like a smaller team there. But yeah, how did it start before I got there? Like, was it kind of the idea being floated around in the studio and
Yeah, I mean, not so much in the studio, I think, because the PS2 stuff was so top secret. They were literally the tech people, the engineers and to a certain extent the very early Primal team were literally locked in a room upstairs that you had to have a code to get into it because the dev kits were so early.
that never changed, by the way, right? All the ATG group, remember, like they had like thumb scans and facial ID and retina scans and things like that to get into the PlayStation 3 room eventually. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, very much a trend. And yeah, so I think the very early days of Primal were mostly focused on landscape rendering, scales of world, as I understand it, a lot of ideation from Chris and Katie, who was the other designer on the team. Just trying to come up with concepts and come up with ideas and pitch this. I remember tarot being a very, very strong theory early on that it was going to be sort of themed around this tarot, concept of tarot cards, and that sort of persisted, although it was a bit watered down, I think, by the end of it. But yeah, Pentacles, you're right. I forgot about that code name. Yeah, it was Pentacles and
Which we
Tarot.
called something very different, like in stupid schoolboy jest.
And these big scrolling worlds, like what can we do on PS2? Let's really push the tech. Because remember, we were also an internal Sony studio at the time. So we got the PS2 early, and as I understand it, it was very much like we've got to make the most of this. We've got to make a game that shows the PS2 hardware off in a way that other people maybe can't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that concept still goes on today for a lot of like the internal Xbox studios and Santa Monica studio with like the God of War games, things like that. You've got to show something really good, or Gran Turismo, or Polyphony, and things like that. So yeah, that's that we were leading the charge in many ways. Ultimately, I think probably we influenced the Getaway starting as well, because third person action adventure world, like they weren't doing anything like that. They were doing This Is Football and other stuff, right? So
Yeah, yeah, we were helping with This Is Football in the audio department at Cambridge because I worked on that for a little bit in QA with Bob and Barn, who did a lot of the music, and they also did early GT sound recording. And yeah, I think you're right. I think there was a shift in the industry in terms of the games that were being made. Right, early PS2 did push. There were some games like Devil May Cry and stuff that felt like Resident Evil 1, but better graphics, but still with that kind of fixed camera framing. Early, Sly Cooper, Jack and Daxter. I think within the sort of Sony pantheon of studios, I think there was a big push for like, let's make these third person worlds that people can explore. We can do streaming. That was one of the big things. We could do streaming. That's what I remember them building a lot of tech for. Like, we can stream stuff in now. We don't have to have small levels with doors that lead to a load into another level. We can just stream these large landscapes in.
I did a quick chat GPT recon thing, and it said one of the things was that there were no loading levels. Like, it was all streaming. I was like, God, yeah, you're right. We did a Ratchet and Clank, didn't we? Like, going through the different portals into different dimensions, and it was all there waiting for you.
Funny you should say that. When I saw Rift Apart, the first thing I thought was, we did that in 2003. Although we had more loading, because when you were winding the cogs to open the portals, it did load. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, unless you jump to a save game or jump to a checkpoint, then yeah, there was no loading in Primal at all.
So, I mean, where did the idea of Scree come from? Because no sane person would ever think of it that was a good idea. Let's not just do one person running around. Let's do two people, and the AI for it, and the fact they can go on goddamn walls and everything. Like, where did that come from?
That to me is Chris Sorrell, to a T, right? The ambition and I thought that was. It was an incredible level of ambition, and I think a level of mechanical complexity that we just couldn't have done on PS1 or couldn't have done on Amiga. Not to that level of complexity, like not to that level of intricacy. And so I think, I mean, Chris would know better than me, obviously, but my impression was that it was, let's push the edge, right? Let's make something crazy because we've got the money, we've got the tech, we've got the talent. Let's go for the moon. And I think, it was really ambitious.
All right, okay, let's start then with Solum. Okay, so first level, as I remember it, the art department were getting design blockouts from yourself and Katie, I believe, at the time.
Yeah, I think a lot of Solon was Katie.
Cubes and stuff, right?
Yeah, but yeah, we were blocking out so we did a lot of block out on the earlier games on Silicon graphics machines in a program called Mappy, but Primal shifted to Maya, and that was a big change for us. That was a big change in
I think that's why I came in, because that's exactly what we'd been learning at university. So there was me and there was a few others that joined at the same time, because we were all in the same class at Bournemouth University, and we joined because you guys had just moved over from 3D Studio Max, I think the artists were using, over to Maya, and it was all like, this is going to be the new regime from now on. Like, they're using it on the Phantom Menace, they're using it on X, Y, and Z. So like, yeah, we'd just been learning it for like 3 years and came in on day one. But I know we upset the apple cart a little bit, because there were definitely some artists there who were really established and had been there for years and years. And here we came kind of like, and we knew it already, and they were still learning. So I know we upset a few people, definitely. But yeah, like you were saying, Maya was like the new future for everything. Like audio, like cinematics were done in it, animation was done in it, like all the blockouts you're saying were done in it, as well as all the weird. Do you remember placing like splines and stuff like that to say where the edges of things were, the combat contact?
Do I remember that, Andy? Do I remember spending time doing that? I certainly do. I think actually, let me just quickly. I have this is like this. I'm not sure how. This
is going to be a super geeky picture you've made.
Yeah, look.
Oh, look at that. Hang on, let me guess where that is. That big block is dividing the Ferri City, I believe, from...
I think you're right.
From... God, I don't know what's on this side of it, though. Look at that, though. Wow.
And that's early Maya 3.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember us... That's the only shot I have, and how on earth I've got this shot, I've no idea.
Yeah,
but I guess
that's a keeper. That one.
Yeah, look, is that really old Windows as well? There's a little PS2 tool dev thing down here, and
God,
running Maya.
What web browser are you using? Are you using Netscape Navigator or something?
I'm not sure. Oh no, look, there's Internet Explorer right there.
Oh wow,
and old Outlook Express.
Blind.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, Maya was a big deal, and I remember for me it was kind of cool because I I'd had some exposure to the tool chain development process, obviously through QA, but I'd mucked around with Mappy a little bit in the evenings and stuff, but I hadn't really built anything. So, actually, that's not fair. I'd done a lot of map building outside of work. I'd done a lot of map building for Quake and Doom. So I'd built stuff in 3D, but I hadn't built stuff at Sony Cambridge. So Maya was like, cool, throw me at it. Like, I don't know, like I'm learning, learning as we go. And I remember it was a big shift for Katie because she'd been in Mappy a lot. And so we were all kind of sort of picking it up. And it's funny you should say that, actually. I do remember that people like yourself and stuff coming in going, yeah, you just do this, this and this. And we were a bit like, okay, cool. Can you just tell me how to do that? Yeah.
The first thing I worked on was the rolling the wheel down the hill from I can't remember what like temple or something like that. And it was the first kind of like bit of physics like in the game, and everyone was like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And I was like, oh, it was easy. I mean, I remember doing that bloody wall smash for probably 2 weeks, but yeah, like it was really powerful, and yeah, the studio ended up using it exclusively for all the projects, I believe, in the end, including London as well. So
yeah, London. I think it was kind of a Sony initiative.
yeah,
and I
don't know whether it is now, but
no, at the time it was, yeah, because I remember them sort of making a big deal about like rolling Maya out with like official Sony emails and stuff like that. It wasn't just Sony Cambridge, and I think actually I would love to do a retrospective on Maya itself, because I feel like Maya did unlock the ability to build 3D worlds in a way, around the same time as PS2 sort of was able to run them. I think there's probably a Venn diagram there between like the scope of why the scope of the game changed and Maya, the tool set.
I remember at the time it definitely felt like the software was exactly what you needed for this. Like, you could load a level up. Sometimes it would take a little long, but you could like move around it, rotate around it, look at exactly what you needed. It was just brilliant software, and it never felt like it was like chugging like really badly. It was just so good. So yeah, totally. It was the right tool at the right time, definitely. So let's get into. So we've got the world, we've got the kind of like the main character kind of like idea, and the kind of and Scree being the secondary character. Like, where did the idea for the combat come from there? Right, because there was obviously quite a lot. You just mentioned a few things. For me, I remember you quoting Soul Reaver, the Legacy of Kain at the time, very similar kind of like thing, and the bouncer was the only like. Do you remember? Like,
I remember the bouncer.
PlayStation 2 game.
Squaresoft's big white, amazing game that was going to kind of blow everyone
We
away.
were like, what is this?
Yeah, it wasn't the best to play, but
But what other inspiration was there for the combat?
Well, funny enough, I just found that there's a review from Play magazine, which I think is I think it was one of the US magazines. I don't think it was the UK one. But
I remember he was kind of like he had a lot of Japanese stuff in there as well, though. I believe, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I'm actually quoted in that talking about the combat, and I think the thing I say that I think is still true is I was a fighting game nerd right at the time. I wasn't super hardcore Street Fighter, but I loved Street Fighter. I love those kind of games. And I was also obsessed. This is why the combat is on the shoulder buttons, which is unusual for the time. I was obsessed with the pressure sensitivity of the PlayStation 2. People forget this, but the PlayStation 2 buttons were all pressure sensitive. They were analog. So you didn't have to, but you could make them respond to pressure. Now, they weren't triggers like we have today, right, which is a lot easier to read pressure on. They were regular buttons, but they were pressure sensitive. And it wasn't just me, but we kind of got obsessed about this idea of, could we do a combat system with light and heavy moves?
Light taps, like little jabs.
With pressure. And we did. And it was very painful, it turned out, because you could do light, but you tend to like really press to get heavy. So testing it became quite uncomfortable.
That's why you're rubbing your hands now. You're crippled basically from it.
Terrible RSI from Primal. No, thankfully not. But yeah, so there was it was sort of a swirl of like, I really liked sort of complex combat systems. Parrying, blocking, dodging, I like that kind of stuff. Although there isn't really a dodge in Primal, which is one of the things I wish we added. I loved finishing moves, that kind of stuff from Mortal Kombat. That a bit of gore, a bit of crazy, like, hey, set them up and then really have a nice animated sequence. Again, we could do a level of animation now that we couldn't have done before. So there was also like, what can we show off? Like, how can we make our animation look really good? Plus, we had the forms, right? We had the 4 forms that Jen could be in, plus the human form. So each of those had their own combat style, and I was like, hell yeah, we've got to make sure that. And we also had an incredible piece of technology that Chris was really obsessed with, which was, we've got to allow you to transform in real time, right? You've got to be able to switch form. And yes, we had to load, and yes, we couldn't do it instantly, but we've got to let you, transform and shift form. So each form had to feel distinct. And that, I'll be honest, for me, as my first real design gig, that was terrifying, because I very quickly, they were like, Alex, you know combat games and you're a hardcore player, why don't you make the combat system? Not like that, but I sort of ended up taking it over.
Or you're making 4 combat systems, like a whip and the claws and everything. And you're like, okay, so I've got to basically create 4 archetypes here that feel different, are also all really cool. Oh,
And the enemies that then you fight against, how do they work, right? Because combat systems are always about that dance, right, between opponent and player. Plus, you've got, how did Scree work, right? And we had a few set pieces where Scree got to fight. So the combat system was, the learning to build a combat system like that was really, really challenging. And the studio wasn't that great at building combat systems, right? Not to disparage anything they'd built before, but it hadn't been a focus, right? Medieval's combat was not its focus, right? C12's combat, was its focus, but that was shooting. We didn't have a track record for building melee combat at all. But I played a boatload of those games, and felt like I had a good handle on what would make things good and bad. The final product may suggest different, otherwise, but
was shooting ever considered? If ballistics had been done over on C12, was that knowledge not?
I don't think so. I mean, we had crossbows and daggers and stuff in medieval, right? Really basic range. But no, I don't remember us ever talking really about, because there was there's this inkling in the back of my head that there was this idea that Jen would never be, right, she's mystical, right, she's got this ability to transform into these different forms, but she wasn't going to be spell casting and doing crazy magic, right? It was always going to be quite physical, whatever she manifested. And so that sort of lent itself to a more weapon-based sort of close combat system. And again, I think we really wanted to lean into that animation of like, and I think some of that was me, because I remember going like, I really want to see the characters fight and smack each other and hit reactions and get knocked back and launching enemies and all that sort of fighting game nomenclature. Like, I really wanted to lean into as much of that as I could. So
you touched upon it just now as well, but in the spirit of like, what were we thinking? What are we doing having an arena fight in an amphitheater in Solon with like giant, what was it, Belazar versus giant Scree, Abdizar? What? You must have thought, oh, I've got to. What are we doing? Why?
Yeah, because that, again, that sort of set piece fight, like, how do you make that feel good? And it's funny when you think,
with a character you haven't each seen before, who has different moves, you're a different scale as well.
And yeah, exactly. And I think we were bumbling our way into something that is very common now, right? Especially in big first party Sony games, right? Is these little set pieces that have bespoke mechanics that sort of meant to be a little bit of a palate cleanser between what you normally do to tell the story and create, like, first party Sony games have been doing that ever since. Not saying we started it, but we definitely had that cinematic, like, we were very much telling a story, and it lent itself to these moments where we wanted these set pieces, and we were naive and we were like, yeah, that's fine, we'll build this little set piece, won't take that long.
We're going to use this ever again? Nope. What do you mean you're not? No, if in any project that we do nowadays, you go, well, you're going to use that again in the next level, and you're going to do it again in the next level after that. No, just one and done.
Yeah, although I do think that is still a spirit. I mean, you look at Ragnarok, right? The latest God of War Ragnarok, right? That has some set pieces in it that are entirely bespoke, that never appear again. That has become a thing that I think a lot of games do now. We didn't invent it, but we were definitely at a time when that wasn't common parlance, and we were like, we could do this. It's not going to be that hard. And we were, young, dumb, and very excited to kind of make something really, really cinematic and deep in a way that we'd never been able to before.
So, talking of cinematic, it'll be on my gravestone. Apinagdi, Trasoseni Enunak.
Yes,
I
you
still
remember
remember that goddamn chant that Hearn was doing to this day.
In the cathedral.
Because, yeah, like, there were cinematics in Medieval, absolutely. The PlayStation 2, like you said just then, allowed for a greater fidelity of everything, really, but a greater fidelity of animation.
And substantially better as well. It wasn't just a little bit. It was like, wow, we can do full mocap, like we can do human
mocap was a thing. I don't think mocap had been done previously on PlayStation 1.
Not
right?
really, no, not. I mean, maybe some of the later games. Yeah, I guess things like Fear Effect and stuff like that, maybe, but some rotoscoping, but yeah, not to the scope of PS2.
It felt like one of those things that had filtered down with Maya from the film industry of like, you can do like really good animations like now, and like the concept of like performance capture, which is like, Avatar 3, now. So yeah, like the idea of doing like cinematics, and to be honest, I've not used a better cinematics tool than the one that Kevin did, which he'll probably be very happy at when he watches this. Since then, like everyone nowadays like builds something in like Blender or something, animates it in Maya, and then spits it out to like a kind of a tool that does the cinematics. We were doing it all inside Maya, so it just felt like natural to have like timeline along the bottom, like the animators were using for the actual animations and everything. And then you just like basically animated it in there, put the cameras in there as well, and it just works. Like I say, it just worked. How many times were we constantly just going, Kevin, like that? What's the matter?
Well, and Kevin with his wonderful tag on the back of his PC that was a grenade that said "Take a ticket" for a tools guy. I love that. I'll never forget. I'll never let him live that down.
Exactly. And the bad monkey, remember that? Like giving people the bad monkey when they broke the build. So I mean, cinematics were like a massive thing, and I don't think we could have like. I mean, the story that we were telling was grandiose, like set in the real world and in this weird Oblivion bit in the middle, and 4 other worlds and characters that were all voice acted, and we had like Sean Pertwee and stuff. People doing. We had the X Factor guy doing the. Do you remember that? And Hudson Like, Andreas Katsoulis, Hudson Like from Xena as well at the time. Like we went from nothing to massive, like immediately. Really good.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you, like, when you joined, was that cinematic pipeline, the process of kind of assembling a cinematic from nothing to running in game, was that built, or was that being built as you were there, or?
I'm trying to think I think that the rolling the log, the wheel down thing was the first test of something with a timeline that you could then put a camera out and look at, and it would play a cinematic, basically. And that was the test of, can we do that? And then it basically went from there. I can't remember the first cinematic we did, though. No, I can't remember what it was. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I feel like the Herne Temple one was the first one where it was truly showing what could be done, though.
I feel like that was our showpiece for a long time, wasn't it?
It was widescreen. It had like fire effects. It was Jen's first transformation, so it felt like a really epic moment. And I guess that broke the back of can we do this now? And then after that, I know the team grew, and there were more people doing cinematics and animations and stuff like that, and we built it from there. But yeah, I don't remember what the first one was, but it felt like that Herne Temple one was like the showpiece. Like I remember like Phil Harrison and people like walking up and watching it on the screen and capturing it at like 1 frame every second and stuff like that. It was great though.
And we took it to a few places, didn't we? A few press events, and maybe, I don't know. We certainly showed it at one of the E3s. It was kind of a big centerpiece. I think it was on some video cover-mounted DVDs on a few magazines. I think that kind of like this is what the quality we can deliver.
Right, okay. Let's move on. Otherwise, we're just going to be here all night. So, Aqua, what were we thinking? Who the hell would do an underwater full level? Not just a single, not like a Tomb Raider jumping into a pool thing. A full level. That must have scared you to death, surely.
That was terrifying, and the combat especially was very scary because trying to build a combat system on the ground that feels good is rough, but then trying to make it work in pseudo 3D. I mean, it was basically in 3D, right? You could swim
Yep.
really anywhere, but once we deliberately made it so once you locked on whatever angle you locked onto, you were kind of locked onto that plane to make it a bit simpler.
So I always wondered, did Zone of the Enders have any inspiration? Because when that came out, it felt like, wow, this is almost 3D, and I can lock onto that, and I've got full motion of it. Like, was it at all, or was that too late? I don't know.
I'd have to look and see when did Zone of the Enders come out, because I remember loving that game, so it's quite possible that it did, but I also know my fuzzy brain means it might have thought, yeah, Zone of the Enders came out in 2001, so 100% Zone of the Enders influenced me because I loved that game.
I can't think of another game with a full 3D camera, underwater, full level combat. I mean, there's games like Subnautica and things like that now, but
Now, yeah, and there was games like Descent, in the early days of 3D, but they were very.
did Tomb Raider ever have a underwater? Could you shoot ever underwater? I feel like there was a harpoon gun at one point, but
Yeah, there was in one of the later ones. I think I can't remember. I definitely don't want to say it was the only game to do it, but it was certainly what we're thinking. Yeah, because it was a very very risky. And I'll be honest, right? When I look back on Aquis, I think it's the weakest of the four worlds we built. Not visually, I think it's probably the strongest visually, and I think actually, in terms of level flow, it's quite interesting. I find it quite interesting. I remember capturing lots of footage of Aquis because it looks so beautiful. But we never quite landed the swimming, we never quite landed the combat, and so it felt a little scrappy, I think.
yeah, I always remember because there was to make it look like underwater, you had to put like a load of fog in it, and like bring the draw distance in to make it look like murky and stuff. And I remember just myself just not there was no clear signage. I remember in Solum we would put like lights, we would put lanterns to kind of like draw your eye. The good design stuff that you would do to lead the player, and I think there was slightly less of that in Aquis. So, and obviously with the motion as well and Jen turning it, yeah, I felt lost sometimes in it, definitely. But yeah, no, crazy. I think yeah, I think hopefully, if we had analytics in our games nowadays, hopefully you wouldn't see like a big like that when people got to Aquis.
But I do. Sorry, just quick. I do remember the technology that we built to do reflections, like proper reflections. I mean, not ray trace reflections like we do now, but like
Pretty damn good though.
very
Like,
impressed. And I remember when we first got that running on PS2, everyone was like, "Oh my god, is this what you can do on PS2? Holy cow!"
and I remember we've had the sun kind of it was like sunset and golden above and like just hit right after the dark night of Solum. It was just like a big fresh a breath of fresh air. Here's one thing I'm not a fan of in Primal. Jen just gets her powers just from anyone. Like she just walks up to like a random NPC and they go, "Hey, do you want to become? Do you want to be able to swim underwater?" And she'll just get her powers from anyone. I was like, that's always felt a bit weird to me. Like,
Well, I think some of that is because that Hearn sequence in the cathedral where she gets first unlocks Ferai is like wow, that's like super cool, right? The chant, the circle she steps in, right? The transformation is really significant. And then yeah, I think the subsequent ones never quite hit in the same way. They didn't quite feel like they built up in the same way. And there was such a great that narrative of Hearn from the very first time you meet him through to the cathedral and through to what happens at the end is such a well thought out arc.
because I remember her kind of going, like trying to breathe, and the screen just go, oh, "Do you want that?" I'm like, what? Like, that's not very good. And the same like kind of later on as well. Like, I think we'll get into like things we would have changed maybe later, and I think that might be one of mine. All right, let's move on. Ether.
Oh,
So
my favorite.
I think it's definitely. I know it was definitely closer to Chris and Mark Gibbons' kind of like aesthetics, and maybe closer in terms of the original tarot kind of like thing that you mentioned, like the idea of like dark fantasy kind of like thing. Definitely. And she's got a whip this time as well. That was the bit. Did that come naturally, or was it kind of like, right, we've done claws, we've done the underwater thing. What
I
else?
think that was me, and I think that was Soul Calibur.
Right. Okay. Well,
That's
Ivy.
Ivy. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I remember because I pulled a lot from Soul Calibur in terms of lessons on animation, reads and tells, and hit reactions and wind ups and wind downs and all that kind of stuff. And I remember talking to Mitch Phillips, who was is an awesome animator at the time, and Tony
Jackson.
Tony Jackson, yeah. And I remember us just sitting there and looking at Ivy on Soul Calibur and just analysing the way the whip moved, and obviously hers was segmented, was a sword, yeah, and it could go through the ground, but just the way it would whip and move, like we were trying to copy that, and that was super hard to do because we had to figure out how to make the collision volume for the whip. Right, when you swing a sword, there's a collision volume on the sword and that travels through space, or you just put a volume in front of the player. So a lot of the way you do it for efficiency is you just put a volume sort of in the rough angle where the attack comes from that hits the enemy. Try doing that with a whip, right? You can't, because it's got to be very skinny or it's got to have this weird shape to it.
And it wasn't physics based, so it was all animated. So you've got to animate it as opposed to like doing flourishes where Ivy would kind of like whip it round and things like that. But this was it was the same whip every single time because it was a predetermined.
It was, yeah, with lots of bones down it, and then we would attach collision volumes. If I remember rightly, we attached collision volumes to the bones, so the actual whip itself did kind of travel through space, and you could hit someone whether they were close or far. And that took us ages. I remember that being like, why? What were we thinking when we got? There was a point where we were like, should we just jettison this? And we were like, but the aesthetic is so cool, like it's going to be so unique. I don't think we ever quite landed the actual mechanical difference between fighting with the claws and fighting with the whip in the way that looking back now, I would probably push for. But the feel of it, just the look of it, and the fact that, and I can't remember Mitch or Tony, I can't remember who animated Jen in Wraith form, but she had such great flow to her, and we really tried to pull that balletic kind of style. And I think it was such an awesome way to fight.
I think now, if you thought of Ferrai Gen as almost Wolverine, kind of like running in like, rah, then you'd almost think the reverse for Wraith Gen. It would almost be like area of effect clearance. Like you'd want to be able to kind of whoosh like that, and like everyone would like get pushed back or something.
Yeah, or crowd control. Yeah, it would have been. We should have changed the enemy count, right? We should have had lots of little enemies that you could whip and knock back and launch and then slam, and yeah, like you say, big AOE slams, and then knock him. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff we could have done to make it feel genuinely different. As it was, it felt like a one-on fight with a bit more range.
Yeah, yeah. I think you'd probably also now have transformation much quicker, so you could combo whip over to Ferrai, like that, over to Volker, sword, and slice the head off or something like that. Yeah, that'd be super cool. Yeah.
But looking back on it, I think one of the things I know I did wrong is I was very focused on Jen feeling good. Right, Jen needed to look unique, all the forms needed to feel good and unique, and I kind of forgot about the opponents, honestly. I don't think I did anywhere near a good enough job of going, hey, if Jen can do this, then we need our opponents to do this, because they are the other half of the dance. And moving on from that project, I learned a lot coming out of that, of things I would have done differently, and that was a big piece I know I missed.
Did we have Ferrai opponents with shields?
Yes, we had the big heavy bruiser guys that would bang their shields, and yeah, you had to use a heavy attack to stagger them, and then you could combo them, or you could stealth. You could get up behind them and stab them in the back.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of people's favorite levels. It looked really good. It was up in the mountains. We were doing like big draw distances from the castle down to the village. The village was full of like impoverished like wraith like people. Jen was like grey, as well. So the palette was all like grey and brown. It was just miserable there. I think we did. Did we do rain?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was raining or drizzling to some extent. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the thing as well. We're like, bloody hell, we've got rain in in this game.
And then the whole castle was really opulent and beautiful. And of course, the thing I love the most about Ether is the disguise.
Yes, the ball gown gen is absolutely brilliant. I remember Phil Harrison coming round and seeing the ballroom scene, which I'd spent so long on. And I remember him seeing the reflections under the main room, which all I'd done was I'd taken the room, flipped it upside down, and like coloured the UVs. And I remember him coming along and going, "That's one of the best things I've ever seen." And I was thinking, well, it works absolutely, but I mean, yeah, like, do you remember this? Like, this might not play, but there we go. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't stand up like nowadays. Let me turn the sound down. It doesn't stand up nowadays. I mean, look at that door. Look at the texture on that door. But look at all those people.
Did you animate the dancers?
Yeah, we mocap the dancers, and then we had to do a little bit of hand animation. But there's so many people here. Like, this broke my machine. This absolutely broke my machine. But then looking back on it, it's a really fun scene, and it works. It works in the spirit of things, and it was different. Like you said, the disguise and the actual character, that Count Raum was here, like, it worked really, really well. So, yeah, I remember that as a highlight of.
I'm trying to remember where the disguise came from because I remember me, Katie, and Chris playing something that had a disguise in it. I can't remember what game it was around the time, and we were both like, Jen has to have a disguise. We have to do that. We have to have a moment where she changes and she's super uncomfortable. We've got to do that. I can't remember what game it was though. It really annoys me. But I remember us having that conversation.
It was a great breather. It's the Mary Jane level in Spider-Man, right? It's just a little breather, has a load of character in it. You see a different side of Jen, and yeah, the actual castle itself was just opulent. Like, we were doing shiny objects for marble and stuff, whereas outside was like all like this kind of marble slate grey, and then Scree was like climbing up the walls of it and stuff. Like, really, really good. So yeah, I think it was a highlight of mine, like, definitely as well. In contrast, though, and this is kind of like where I shut up, Volker, I don't remember this whatsoever. I don't remember Volker much at all. In actual fact, for me, that it feels more slightly generic in terms of aesthetic than the others. I don't know why. I think nowadays, if we were to do it, we'd overemphasize the fire and brimstone of it. Like, maybe do it in a volcano, like everything's shiny and gold. It's full of smoke. Maybe make smoke a thing. I always felt like the level, like, not the level design, but I don't know, the aesthetic of the level, like the lore behind the gin. God, I remember that. The lore behind the gin maybe wasn't as strong as it was, especially coming after Ether, which was very specific on dark fantasy. This felt for me like slightly different. What were your thoughts on it?
Panic. That's what my thoughts were. Volker came together super late. I think if I remember rightly, we did the Volker boss in alpha. And alpha is normally the point where you lock.
Yeah, where you go. Feature complete. Let's stop doing things now.
Yeah, pre-prod, pre-production, production. You hit, kind of alpha, which is sort of like, yeah, exactly, feature complete. Like, the game's there. We're now just going to start making it better. Volker wasn't there. I'm pretty sure Volker wasn't there at alpha. It was in pieces. Yeah.
We were all so busy trying to get everything else done, and Volker was then also needing to be done as well. Like, I don't have much memory of it at all. Definitely people like in another part of the building kind of like worked on that, but it did feel like it was coming in late. Absolutely.
Yeah, it came in very, very late, and I think it's probably the weakest because of that. Because I think it's the smallest level. I think the combat had a lot of potential, and we never really got to it because we'd spent so much time on the flipping whip, I think. Because the sword, right? We had this big gold sword that you could form, right?
Put our hands together and it's like that, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you could have done lots with that, and we didn't really get to it. The Jinn, I thought the Jinn were really evocative with that kind of like eagerly kind of bird-like form to them. They were really cool. We could have done a lot with them. It just all came together super late, and I don't think it really gelled in the way that any of the other levels. It was almost like Aquis without the time, right? Like Aquis had a lot of time, we just didn't quite nail it. Volca was like, it was an interesting idea that we didn't quite have enough, we didn't quite nail. For Volca, it was because we ran out of time. For Aquis, it's because it was really hard. And I think both of those, to me, sort of blur together a little bit in that they're the weakest in terms of, they don't fully hold together compared to Solum or Aether, which I think really, really do. And I think it's impressive that the third world holds together so well, because usually you would kind of expect it to almost drop off, and it does in the last world, but I think Aether held together so well, we didn't, I don't know, just the way it goes.
And it's not the end of the game. Like, the end of the game is is the big fight against evil Lewis and stuff like that in the central bit with Kronos and stuff like that. So in the Nexus, that's it. Yeah. So I guess there's a question there of I remember, maybe I'm misremembering. I remember the Nexus going through a couple of design iterations in terms of like layout before settling on like the central thing. Like, yeah, and then you've got to plan a boss battle there. So was it designed as a boss battle first, or as a lore specific thing first? Yeah. Okay.
If I remember correctly, the boss battle was like, we always knew that there was that kind. I don't know if we always knew, but there was definitely a knowledge for a period of time that that's where it was going to kind of crescendo. But there was not. I mean, again, you look at that arena that we had that Lewis fight in. It's not great, and I think again it sort of came together very loose. It's blurry between me, Katie, and I forgot Robert. There was another guy. There was another designer.
Oh yes, glasses.
Yes, I'm really sorry. I can't remember his surname. It annoys me. He sat behind me. And so it was a mixture of like the three of us kind of tag teaming a lot of this. So I think I can't remember who did the Lewis fight. Maybe Katie did it and I helped, and maybe I did the Volca fight and Katie helped. I can't remember, but I remember those two fights being very panicked and like we didn't quite nail them in the way that we wanted to. And they certainly didn't have the iteration they needed.
It's essentially a donut, the actual thing, and you're basically fighting in kind of around the rim of it. Whereas any other game, you might think, no, it's an arena. It's like a giant room, and you've got the space to move around. It wasn't. This was kind of like, you're always on a curve, kind of going around. So yeah.
And I remember I'm fuzzy, but I remember there being a square where you kind of fought him in initially that was kind of off the side of Nexus. Maybe that's when it started, and then it went back to the center. I can't really remember now. I think for me, I probably didn't work on the final boss fight as much, which is why it's a bit fuzzy in my head. But I remember us, for equal reasons. The same reason why I think the Volca boss fight is bad is the same reason why I think that the final boss fight isn't bad's the wrong word. We didn't quite deliver what we wanted to because we just didn't give it the iteration. I think that's the thing that, I definitely learned coming out of Primal, right? Is your first idea. Here's something I learned. We spent a lot of time on Primal sitting in rooms designing stuff.
Right, as opposed to prototyping.
Yes. And I distinctly remember the Volca boss fight. I think we spent like a month designing it on paper, something like that. And then we put it in and it was dreadful. It was terrible. And we were like, well, we don't have a whole lot of time left.
But it should have worked. It wrote it all down and everything.
Yeah, we spent months going back on it. And I think that was a big lesson for all of us of like, yeah, we can have a great idea. And yes, we shouldn't just go half-cocked and just go make something. But don't spend that long trying to work out every nuance of it on paper, because when you put it in and play it, it's all going to go out the window and it's going to take on a life of its own. And I don't think the Volca boss fight or the Lewis boss fight got the benefit of that. We sort of spent a lot of time figuring them out and then on paper, and then when we actually executed them, they weren't very good, and then we didn't have enough time to really iterate and refine them. So they didn't quite land where I think we were. Certainly from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for everybody else, from my perspective, the combat in both of those fights didn't feel that interesting. It's kind of forgettable. Because it didn't maybe have the panache that it could have had if we'd iterated on it more.
For the grand finale of it, yeah. So I guess You say you didn't have time, but I mean, I don't. I just remember milestones just flying by, and it just felt like we had all the time in the world. Like, were you made aware more of like, oh no, we didn't pass that milestone, or oh god, like no, actually we've got an extension to the project. I don't think I ever heard of like I did on other games, I did on 24, but on Primal, it always felt like we were shipping on a certain date and it had to be that. But maybe I was only a junior artist at the time, so maybe I wasn't like aware of those executive decisions on it.
I do remember there being a shifted date. Yes, I do remember that we had one date in on paper, and we were not going to hit that.
Was that Christmas? Because we launched in March, right? And I always feel like if you miss Christmas, you come out at Easter then instead.
I suspect that was the case. Yes, probably in November maybe, and then we missed. We knew we were going to miss that. What I do vividly remember is Sony Cambridge at that time was a golden child in the Sony, the Sony studios. Right, we'd done Medieval 1, we'd done Medieval 2. They'd been very successful. C12 had done okay. We'd helped out a lot of other teams because we had a lot of talent in the studio. PS2 was coming. We were going to knock it out of the park, and I think there was an expectation that we could have all the time we needed to make something truly great, and we weren't gonna let them down. And so I think there was a long period of time where we were sort of free to do whatever we wanted to do, take as much as we needed, hire whoever we needed, take all the technology we needed, right, to really push the PS2. And I think we did that technically. I think we made a game that clearly stands head and shoulders with anything that that came out around that era. But I don't think we delivered anything gameplay wise. We don't think we delivered enough gameplay wise to make it like a true. When you think about the games that came out from other studios and PS2, God of War, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, I think those were truly landmark games. I think, don't get me wrong, I'm very proud of Primal. I think we made something at a time that very few people could have made, to a quality bar that very few studios could have delivered. But personally, from the design perspective, I don't think we landed it as well as we could have. And so I think there was an element of like, you've got time, we trust you. Okay, now you really do have to get it done though, like, right? And that's when I remember the panic over Volker and the final boss fight coming in of like, shoot, we really are running out of time here, and we don't have a whole lot of iteration, so it's really like, get it in and hope it's not terrible. So.
And I mean, like the company culture was, no one was messing around. I mean, we were having fun. There was a really good atmosphere there. We were joshing with each other, and everyone was working solidly. No one was taking the mick. Everyone was just doing brilliant work, knocking it out of the park. But we had a really fun atmosphere in that studio. I think that's where like the late night takeaways started, right? The delivery guy would arrive and we'd all go into that yellow kitchen, remember?
There's us having fun.
I need this picture because I think I've got it somewhere, but I can't search for it on my photo, so I don't know where it's gone. This was exactly. Look what's in the background there. So is that Onimusha?
Onimusha 2, I think, Virtua Fighter 4, and then the poster my dad printed for Primal. Yeah.
So I've got a question about this, which is, why did we have face paints in the office?
It was a Primal thing. We did some giveaway, like there was some marketing stunt we did where we got people together and there was like a little goodie bag, and in that goodie bag was face paints to paint Primal faces, and so we did it and then took a silly picture.
Like, why did we do that? And who started? I bet it was Gavin that started it, actually, on the left hand.
Yeah, Gavin Bell, who was Ferrai with his Monsters Inc. horns on. Yeah, I don't remember who started it, but yeah, I remember you and I were both like, hell yeah, let's go, let's do this.
Let's do this. Yes, absolutely. So, okay, so we finished the game. Marketing wise, like, there was a lot of marketing. So I remember like press ads. So I think as soon as we finished, we basically started. Well, no, as soon as it finished, I don't know what we were doing. We were still employed, but we had no game to work on, right? So I think we moved into marketing stuff. which is why I started doing things like this. Remember?
I think you did. Yeah, I think I do remember that, artists and folks were moving. So this is what I was doing. I was doing trailers. Because this is the other thing, right? Is my journey. Well, yeah, let's look at the artwork first. Because, yeah, there was a number of posters and covers and front, promotional pieces that I know you guys were doing. A lot of renders that showed up. There were some really nice ones as well.
We were getting all the original. We were getting all the main characters, and then basically kind of like smoothing them over, and then using the render system within Maya that like no one had touched because everything was like real time. And then me and Jason Riley and a few other people were just like taking these beautiful, characters. Jason did a completely. Oh no, actually, I think. Or was it outsourced? I can't remember. We did a proper full res gen, like, and it came back and it didn't look quite like her because we're used to seeing like the low poly version, and then we saw like this beautiful, render with like loads of polygons in it, and it was like, oh, they've smoothed her out too much and stuff like that. And I remember Jason like messing around with that to kind of get it back where we wanted. But yeah, I think we didn't have a project to work on, but we moved straight into marketing assets. I didn't know that you did trailer stuff, so right. Was that capturing footage and doing montages?
Yeah, so this is a funny story. There was a whole video editing suite and department at the studio, did all the trailers for Medieval 2, and I would hang out in that quite a lot because I would often be the guy playing the game, and Tom and a few other folks would be the people capturing the footage. And so I kind of got familiar with that process. And then Tom left midway or early in Primal and early in that kind of time. And there was no one to do video editing. And I was like, well, I know how to play the game, right? And I know how to use the video editing, so why don't I do it? And they were like, sure, if you want to. So at one point I was designing all day and then I was video editing at night. And so I did a lot of the trailers, the early promotional trailers before the game came out, capturing the footage and learning Speed Razor, which crashed all of the time. And learning how to edit to music. And of course, we had 16 Volt with a band that Chris and Katie loved, that ended up being sort of the main music for the game, for the combat music for the game. Yeah, there you go. Composed, and that's the Bombard one. Yeah, that also has the 16 Volt. I have the 16 Volt album somewhere as well. Yeah, because Bombard, who were the audio folks at the studio, did the original music, and actually they've had that performed many times since. Right, I just found some the first music symphony in Europe that was where I don't know where it was, somewhere, and Bombard had Primal. The Primal Suite was part of that with Zelda
Prague
and
Philharmonic Orchestra originally. I mean, this CD here says contains a enhanced CD with a previously unreleased Primal trailer. So maybe one of yours is on there.
I did, yes. I did that extended trailer. I remember that trailer. So if you go look Primal trailer right now, the launch trailer, I did that. And I'm super proud of it. And it's made me a video editor ever since. I love video editing. Is the only thing I've ever found that can compete with game development as something that I find satisfying in a similar way. So the very original trailer, which I think, let me, slightly self-indulgent, but this one. So there's kind of a low res version of it, which is this PlayScope one. But the thing I love about it is the 16 Volt music was, oh man.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And that. So, man, we had this thing where on the controller you could get Jen to look at the camera. Chris added loads of really cool things to let me edit and capture stuff. So that shot of her running, like, was me running on the controller towards the camera, and then I could press a button and I could get her to look at the camera. Like, and all this the snap cut stuff. Like I learned so much about, mostly from Tom, but I learned so much about how to edit to music, edit on the beat, like pulling all this stuff together. It was so satisfying, and like I fell in love with video editing from making this trailer. And it shipped with the game, and it went out on all the CDs and all the DVDs and all the promotional stuff. Man, I loved video editing. So I think there was a period where I was doing promotional trailers as we were wrapping the game, and then I was also doing promotional trailers afterwards. But you're right. I think what happened is we finished the game, and unlike now where you're working on day one patch, or you're working on patch subsequent patches, you're done. The game ships, right? There's a gold master date. You hit the gold master date. Game goes off to production. Yes, maybe you get a few QA reports and make sure there's not anything that's going to mean it fails the gold master, but that's it, and it goes.
I remember there's loads of stuff that, because I did lots of little things as well, like the main menu. Remember, like the title screen, like the fire and the kind of like the green fire, and the pixel art for the save data on the memory card, which ended up being like little kind of like chibi kind of like art. The user interface for the pause menu where you could collect tarot cards and stuff like that. I was like, we collecting tarot cards. Like, what are we doing? We didn't need to do that, right?
No. Well, here's the other thing we didn't need to do. What were we thinking, right? Remember, this game was on DVD, right? Because PS2 was DVD, and so we were obsessed with this idea of having chapters, just like a DVD, right? And like a movie on a DVD. So every time we made a gold master of the game, I had to speed run the game and create a chapter point at about 40 different spots throughout the game that we designated as like various different points where we wanted to, and it would screen grab and create a save point and save it off to my PC, and we would then put those into the software, and it would create a screen grab and a restart point. And I had to do that every single time we made a gold master, and we couldn't make the gold master until I'd done that, because that date had to be on the gold master. So I remember many times at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, I was the one sitting there doing the speed run. I think I got it down to like 2 hours and 45. I could speed run the whole game, chapter point, save the data, okay, put it on the disc, okay, gold master, okay, go. Then we had to burn the disc, okay, go, and then we'd send it off.
Come from QA, couldn't you have just gone, this is a QA job to do this, surely?
No, because we had no internal QA. So at that point, the only way to do it, we would have had to have got Liverpool QA, that external QA, and of course we were the ones that had the data, so we had to do it on site. And I was the best. I just happened to be the mug, and then the guy. Oh, I'll do it. And I used to just speed run. Man, I remember so many times, and everyone was sitting waiting. This was the thing. So often, what would happen is we'd build the game. Okay, we think we're good. Okay, everyone just go home. Me and JBB, John Baptiste Boccato, who is the producer, or me and Chris, or me and someone will just sit in the studio. I'll just do the speed run. They'll sit on, playing something else. And then as soon as I'm done, okay, go. They would just compile the disc and burn it. Or James Busby or somebody would just sit and wait with me. But I was sitting there with someone waiting for me to like speed run the game. And if I messed up one of them, the whole thing I'd have to go back. I mean, I could resave it, but like if I wasn't careful, if I triggered the wrong cutscene, or I picked up the wrong thing, or I did trigger it at just the wrong time, I could ruin the whole thing. So it was so stressful. I must have done that like 40 or 50 times, and just having people sitting on me waiting.
That whole change that has been in the industry of like a day one patch and kind of like thinking, you know what, it's not the end of the world that it's out there. Like, we had to be bug free at the time. Like, I don't know how many bugs up we ended up, what the bug count was at the end of the thing, but I remember like it was like a big thing of like, this is going out, and this is, if it's not done, like that's what's going to be printed onto a disc in Sweden or Switzerland or whatever it was, right? So the pressure was huge to get rid of bugs.
And QA would carry on testing, because you'd hit Gold Master, you would have gone through enough TRC where they would check that it all matched all the requirements for the platform, and that there weren't any A class or really bad B class bugs in the game. But then when you sort of went, everything's good, they would carry on testing it. And sometimes they would come out and go, oh no, we found a crash. And you'd be like, oh no, but we've already shipped it. Like, what do we do?
Yeah. There's already a factory in Sweden just like printing these things out. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I think a lot of us would kind of sit there on call, basically. Like, the game's done, QA's still testing. If they find anything, we have to jump on it right away. And I do remember that happening once on Primal. Somebody found a crash bug on one of the last boss fights, and it took me and Katie ages to repro it and reproduce it so we could see what happened and then fix it. And we had to, I think we had to call a halt on a production run at one point. I think JBB would remember better than me.
What were the thinking now? What are the costs involved in that to stop a production run of a game?
Yeah, and all those discs that were burned just all have to be thrown away, and you start the whole production cycle again. Yeah, it was very expensive, which is why it had to be a killer bug for them to actually opt. And sometimes they would release a version 1.0, especially if you go look now with all the ROMs available online. If you go look at a lot of the big games, you will find PS1, PS2 era, there is like version 1, version 2, where they did do a soft reprint, and the later versions would have a fixed bug in it or a fixed this in it. But that was rare, and only really for the really big games that could afford it.
So yeah, let's get into the marketing side of it then. So, and kind of like PR stuff. So I presume you've got one of these still.
Unfortunately, I don't.
Oh,
I wish
no.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to mine.
So I won't go into it on this one because I actually did a video of this on my YouTube, like a full unboxing of it. But yeah, this has got like some beautiful like artwork in there from Mark, of all the levels and stuff like that, and kind of a bit about them. It's really nice. That's it though. You don't get a version of the game. You get like this this scroll which is like wafer thin. Like, wow, God, we were really presenting this really well. Wafer thin bit of artwork. Well, I think you've got some artwork though still of Gibbons though.
Yeah. So yeah, that I've definitely got some artwork which we can look at in a minute. I think just talking about marketing, yes, there was a lot. I found this. I guess we did some kind of.
Oh, where's that from? Primal. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Somewhere in London, I think.
That's at the Tate, London, I think. Yeah, that's at the Tate, London. That's where I met my wife. There we go.
Really?
Yeah.
At this event?
My wife was the photographer for the Tate at that event, and I met her, and then married her later. So yeah.
No way! That's so cool. I feel like I should send you these then, because this. I guess this was the pass that got us in, and then this was the invite. That's so cool.
We also got. I don't know whether you've seen this as well. This was a comic book that got made. Like, I mean, I'm not quite sure what it is. It might be, yeah. Like, there's some of these things I don't know. Like, this tells the story of what Scree did up until he met Jen, basically. So that's really cool. So I'm keeping hold of that. We got this. I wondered if you had any hand in this, which is the Prima official guide. I was thinking, hang on a minute, they must. Hey, now did they come to us?
They did, yes. Yeah, me and Katie helped with this quite a bit, if I remember rightly. They did a wonderful job. They did a really, really good job of compiling everything. I think what happened was they requested a lot of input from us, like a lot of info. And I think I remember Katie and I sort of sending them walkthroughs of every level. I don't know if there's any credits in here, but I remember us sort of sending them walkthroughs of all the info, and then they just went ham on it. They made their own maps. They took all their own screenshots. These little paper maps they did that were all sort of on brand. I remember us getting this, and we were just like, "Holy cow, man! These folks are the real deal. They did such a great job." And these are dead now. Like nobody.
I was going to say, like, what? I wonder what the last game was that Prima did a guide for, and what year that was.
Probably a Call of Duty or something, but. This is. I'm really glad I kept this because it is the work that Prima put into this was super impressive, and I think this was only in America as well. I think because the Prima stuff, I think we had a different one over here, didn't we? So I think this was American.
Will it say on the back? It might say dollars on the back.
Yeah, Random House registered in the US. Yeah, so I think this was a US only thing. Oh yeah, yeah, it's on the back there.
So cool.
Yeah, it
Great
does have
picture of that as
UK,
well.
but yeah, I think it did get shipped over here. But yeah, it was mostly a US thing.
Have you got this as well? Have you got your award?
I do, but all of my awards and stuff are all in storage in California. When I moved back to the UK, were planning on going back at some point, so I left most of that stuff over there. So all my awards, unfortunately, are over.
Yeah. It's
It's nice.
now on here it says we launched on the 11th of April, right?
Yes, because apparently, if you pre-ordered it, you could pick any free DVD.
Wow.
I don't know where this is from. From Choices, I think this is in America. Oh no, this is UK, $39.99.
Now this is at a time when this is from a bygone era, right? Like this is from a time when the amount of money being thrown at every game was absolutely massive. Like if you think of the games that Sony Cambridge and London were doing at the time and thereafter, it was the Getaway Black Monday, it was Ghost Hunter, it was 24. Like the amount of money that would be required and the time it took us to make those games, like essentially killed it for everyone, right? Because then SingStar, Buzz, and iToy came out with very small teams, but huge, much more mainstream, more successful financially titles, right?
You say that though, like how many of us made Primal? 50?
Yeah.
50 people, maybe 40
There, were-
people.
there was essentially three rooms, wasn't there? There was like the downstairs area with the concept art and where you were. There was the next room, like there was adjoining. There was probably 15 people in there. And then upstairs, there was only 10 to 12 people up there. So a very small team.
Yeah, and which I think was a large team at the time, but now is a tiny team. Now is an indie team. Is a large indie team, but would be an indie team. Yeah, we were a big team for the time, and like you said, we did have a lot.
So we used to get a launch. We used to have a launch party for every single for every single game that was shipped. Um, I think our launch party was it in London or was it in Cambridge? I can't
I
remember.
think there was two. So I think if I have,
I mean, that just says everything. There were two launch
there were two
parties.
launch parties because I think we did our own.
Yep. We had one definitely. Oh my God, look at these. We had one definitely in a pub in Cambridge.
Yeah, that was this one. Yeah, so we had some. We had the game running. This was all the QA. So we had four people from QA Liverpool that came on board, and this guy Carl Jones, he's now a big designer too. He's had a lot of success. I'm not sure. I unfortunately can't remember the other folks, but yeah. There was. So these are all taken by the QA. There's JBB and his wife.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Why is it so overexposed? Like
I don't know why it's overexposed on your. Yeah, I don't know.
we used to get a Christmas present every year, didn't we? Remember we got this the Sony CyberShot camera. Maybe these are all taken on that.
Well, no, on my screen it looks fine. For some reason, when I'm sharing it, it just looks weird. This is all the QA folks. There's Katie. Look, there's the red Primal shirt back there.
Hey, evidence it did exist.
Yeah, see, look, there it is, the red Primal shirt.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there's the Primal thing. We all got one. There's JBB again. I think there's Phil Harrison.
That's Phil.
Yeah, looking slightly awkward.
He's like, do you know who I am?
Yeah, a very big wig in PlayStation. Very responsible for PlayStation Europe's. One of the people very responsible for PlayStation Europe's success.
Oh, yeah, I go. He's having a good old glass of wine there.
Yeah. I think he had a good time. He had a good time. He was a good dude. I always loved Phil.
He was good. Yeah.
And then there's me.
Hey,
Looking very young. See, there's the red shirt. See, I do remember having the red shirt.
wow.
So yeah, bunch of us.
Wow.
From the
QA on the rampage.
Yeah, I think they all came from Carl. I think he took a load of pictures because they came down from Liverpool. They were kind of our dedicated Liverpool testers, and we invited them to the party. But I think there was a launch party in London as well, because at that time, Sony London, Sony Cambridge, right? Sony London, most of the events were done in London, and then we would often do satellite ones for Cambridge so that the Cambridge crew could kind of get together.
Yeah, we had like the London ones were like, oh my god, they had like Dieter Von Teese turn up and stuff.
All kinds of things. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on Sony, the money that Sony PlayStation had in that era, and the stuff, renting islands and crazy, the Millennium Dome and like all kinds of stuff. But
Um, so yeah, I remember we had some cosplayers at ours in London, definitely, and I guess that links to the next kind of like thing, which is Russia. Why did we go to Russia?
so we were one of the first games in PlayStation to do a Russian SKU, and that means we did a full Russian language version of Primal, localized into Russian for the Russian market, which at the time was very rare because there was so much rampant piracy in Russia that they very rarely would put the effort in. And I think Primal was one of the most localized games at the time. eFigs was the normal one, so English, French, Italian, German, Spanish. We did Russian, we did Portuguese, I think.
Brazilian Portuguese,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. We did a couple more, a couple at the time that weren't very common, and so as a result, a few of us. And you went, didn't you? You went to
I
Russia.
went. Oh yes, because I remember us walking. We walked. We had a little guide, and yeah, we. I'm sure we went to dinner with some people, and I ate a meat drink.
You ate a meat
Like
drink.
it was disgusting.
This
Like
it was
there we go.
this.
There we hang on. Which way? It was one of those glasses, and it was basically a drink full of meat. It looked like Winalot. It looked like pedigree chum. It looked like dog food, and I don't know what it was. It was absolutely disgusting. But this was supposed to be a traditional Russian meal that, of course, we had to kind of like smile through and stuff.
These were our hosts.
Yeah, that's it. There I am on the
Yeah,
right.
there's you. Yeah,
Blimey. But I remember. Oh, who was the guy in the blue shirt on the right hand side? I remember
I
him.
don't know who that
Marketing or
is.
PR or somebody.
Yeah, I think so.
But I remember us. We had a guide and he was walking us around Russia, and I just remember like backhanders being paid to from the taxi driver to the police to let us through certain areas. I remember us walking under the roads in like the kind of like not the subway system but just like a little path under the road, and there was like a small little tobacco shop, and in there they were selling pirated games in there, and that was the reason. It was like this is that's how it is over here, and you being kind of official is like the way that like we're taking things forward. So
Yeah, I think I bought a full copy of Maya for like $1, just because you could.
did you ever try it?
No, I didn't.
It didn't load up or
No,
something.
just because we could. And yeah, I've got a picture of So there. Oh no, there it was. There's the cosplay. There was a lady dressed as Jen.
And this was cosplay before cosplay, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
Like we
yeah.
didn't even know the term, right? There was only really like Nell McAndrew dressing up as Lara Croft, at the time, and that was about it. So this was something you would do totally nowadays, but like felt new and weird at the time.
That's right. And then the other thing was we got to go to Star City.
I have no photos of this. It's such a shame.
I only have one or two, unfortunately.
Looking back, it was like, look at what we did. We got to stand on those things and see the centrifuge thing where they did the training and sit in the actual desk where they learned everything. I was like, wow, thinking back now, that is a crazy experience we got to have.
Yeah, and I feel like that was another example of like we were lucky to get that experience, right? Somebody paid someone or something because it was deserted. I remember us going there. There was like no one there. We drove out to Russia. And we were there for a while. We walked around the whole thing. We saw command center. Who knows? We saw the command center. We saw all the training. Like you say, well, it was amazing. It was amazing, and they were such great hosts, and they were so stoked about. I know this little like leaflet they gave out, all in Russian, and then like that's what this other lanyard is. This was the lanyard they gave us for the little launch event. Yeah, so yeah, I remember that it was such an amazing trip.
So we launched. We had that cover, which I think everyone knows. We had the American cover, which I think everyone knows as well. We had this collector's edition, which I think is signed by you on there. Can you spot your
Probably
signature?
Gibbons. I'm not sure if I'm on the front there. Might be
Okay,
on the
there's some on the back
maybe.
as well,
I
but
probably signed it.
yeah, okay. What was in the collector's edition? Or was it just a shiny
I
box?
think it came with no, it came with the Muse soundtrack, didn't it?
It says it on there. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, comes with the soundtrack by 16 Volt. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, and some additional music as well. I think it might have come with some video stuff as well, maybe some some trailers and some behind the scenes stuff.
Now, you had it in that picture of us, and I've got it here, but this never came out.
No,
So where did this artwork come from? It's obviously from Mark.
Mark did it, and we did it as a poster. Yeah, so at one point we had some posters for an event. I can't remember whether it was E3 or what, but yeah, that was one of the pieces that my dad actually, he was a printer at the time, printed the posters for us. We had that, and then we had the one with the tattoo with the red Primal on.
But this never came out because that has got a totally different back to all of these, which have got all different backs. So this was a thing, and I don't know where it has come from whatsoever. And then, of course, there's this version.
Yes, the Japanese one.
So tell me about the Japanese version and any changes that had to be made.
I was trying to think. I think there was some changes to Ether. I think we had to change the Wraith to some extent. Oh, there was something about the Jin as well. I think we had to rename them. I don't think we could call them Jin. Even translated, right? I don't think we could use that name in the translation. There was something else about the Jin, their fingers or something we had to change. And then obviously it was fully localized into Japanese, text, dialogue, everything. And it was a really nice version as well. The manual was really nice. I remember them doing a really good job of the manual. And it was a full like Japanese. And I remember us getting that. We were so stoked. I've got mine's in storage, but I remember getting that and being like, yeah, man, we did a proper like Japanese version of the game. It looks so nice.
And it wasn't Sony, was it? Wasn't it? It wasn't Capcom, was it? It was somebody else. Somebody else that published it.
Was it?
It wasn't Sony, I don't believe. Although it does say Sony on here.
Because I know that happened with 24, but I felt like Primal was always Sony wherever it went.
Yeah, maybe I've misremembered that completely. That was the kind of like the high res gen that we had.
I was going to say, yeah, because I've got that the half face silhouette of Jen on the black that looked like that.
So, as we kind of like near the end of this, so were there any games that? Because I remember you used to get all the latest games, and we had a locker, didn't we, of games that that Sony gave us the games library. But I remember there were a couple of seminal games that everyone was waiting for, and we got them like super like early, or if not early, on the day they absolutely came out. First for me was Metal Gear Solid, which I remember just everyone going gaga for completely. The other, weirdly, I remember, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer was you go look at all the interviews. That was a big. I remember Chris loved that game. We liked the combat. I didn't. I actually didn't like the combat in Buffy, personally. It was fine. Yeah. It wasn't for me. I'm not saying it was a bad game. It just wasn't for me. But yeah, the whole sort of tone of Buffy was very, very, very on par.
Yeah, and also that was another game with like full voice acting, and it was the same kind of like idea, supernatural, blah blah blah, strong girl, hero.
Yeah, a lot of. I mean, there was a lot of Buffy in Gen anyway from the TV show, but certainly the video game.
What other games were there that maybe changed or influenced the direction of it from your point of view?
That is a good question, and one that I don't think I can remember. I mean, I remember the games that we, obviously Zoe, we've talked about a few, right? Zoe, Soul Calibur. There were a few games that I remember sort of being on my mind, and I was a big fan of at the time. I remember looking at DMC's combat quite a bit, because I remember we got DMC in a US copy of DMC, and in the old Sony Cambridge studio in Quern House in Shelford, we had an upper floor that had a projector in, and I remember sitting up there and just playing the bejesus out of DMC and trying to understand its combat system, which I don't think I did a very good job of interpreting, but I remember really loving that game. And so there were definitely some influences there, I think. But I don't really remember any major game sort of coming along and us going, oh no, like we need to respond to that. Um, but fuzzy
Did we
memory.
ever really know how the game had done? I remember us getting seeing review scores, and I remember seeing like like Edge magazine and CVG and whatever, right? But I remember the critical like looking at the critical like acclaim it got, but I never was told how whether it had sold, how many copies it had sold ever. Did you ever get that information?
I, I, I don't know. There's a number in my head which I think is fuzzy, so I'm not going to say it. But what I do remember is when the game came out.
It's 23 years later, Alex. You can say what you want. Like, so Sony's not going to come for us anymore, I don't
No,
think.
true. I just don't want to disparage the game in a way that might not be true. What I do remember is when the game came out, there was a lot of expectation that it needed to sell very well because they'd invested a lot of money in it, right? They'd spent a lot of money marketing it. And so it had to sell, well for which, let's say a million. Let's say it had to sell a million, right? It did not. And I remember being in a meeting post Primal, maybe 2 months after, 3 months after Primal coming out. And, there was a lot of discussion about bonuses, right? Because the way often we would work in those days is we would work really hard on the game. We'd obviously get paid a salary. And then depending on the game you would usually get some kind of launch bonus for finishing it, completion bonus. And then you would get progressive sales bonuses as the game came out. And I distinctly remember maybe it was 2 to 3 months after the game coming out, they were like, "There's no bonus. The game didn't sell well enough, so there's no bonus." And us being like, "Oh, that's not great." So I don't think the game sold as well as it did. And I'll be honest, at that point, I remember sort of going, "Bummer." Like I feel like we put a lot of time and effort into that. I can see things we did wrong. Okay. And then I was at E3 maybe 2 or 3 years later doing 24, right, showing 24. And somebody came up to me and went, "Wait, is this the studio that made Primal?" I was like, "Yeah." And they went, "Did you work on Primal?" I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Oh my God, I have to tell you how much Primal was amazing." Blah, blah. And it just went off one. And then I had another person do it. And then I had another person do it. I had like 7 or 8 people across those 2 days just effusing how much Primal changed their lives. And I was like, I kind of don't care how much Primal sold. There were people that loved it.
That's exactly kind of where I wanted to kind of end this up, which is that that I stumbled upon a Facebook group, which is the Primal PlayStation. Primal PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4. They're very optimistic on that, on that group. But yeah, there's people on there just sharing all of their like amazing stories they had. Like it was the first game I played with my dad, and blah blah blah, and super cool. There's some people who own the press kit that we just showed. There's people who have got every cover bit of artwork. There's people now taking the old screenshots and redoing them with AI to make them look like sort of like modern day and stuff like that. Like any collection of like the original concept art and stuff like that. And when I found that originally, I don't know where, it was like a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, like that's nice. And being able to go back and see that it did actually have an impact on people, like especially from women as well, because I think unfortunately now, if you did the same story now, it would come across as woke, right? And everyone would be like, oh, you've got a female lead and blah blah blah. Blah. But at the time, we came culturally up from a time when the Spice Girls were massive, right? And Buffy the Vampire Slayer was on TV and Xena was on TV. It was a time of like strong women doing their own thing, and it was cool. Like it was awesome, So yeah, it exists in a different time period. Yeah, unfortunately, Primal, but people have always been asking like if there were to be a remake or a remaster, kind of what would we do differently? And I think we've touched about on it, haven't we? I would say like switching between powers, regardless of which realm you're in, would be definitely one. So you could kind of do weird combos and stuff. Absolutely. it always bugged me that, I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but it always bugged me that we showed 4 realms, but was that all there was? Or was there more? Were there lots of other worlds we never went to, right?
I think I remember the one of the thrusts of the story is that the energy from the 4 realms is what Kronos controlled and sort of kept everything in balance. But
But maybe there's more. Maybe there's more that could have been explored in a sequel, maybe.
well, speaking of
Do we want to talk about that?
I do want to speak about that because one of the pieces that we haven't really spent time on, we've mentioned it a couple of times, is Mark Gibbons, right? Who was incredibly influential on the look and the style, and I think a lot of the reason why Primal resonates is him, right? His tone and style that he brought to the presentation, to Jen, to the characters, to the world. And famous Mark Gibbons, famous from Warhammer and 40k, a lot of Games Workshop stuff. Continues to work at Blizzard. He's had a lot of influence throughout the industry. And what I just found, I have this big stack of concept art that I saved when Sony Cambridge shut down. I donated half of it to the Cambridge Computer History Museum, so they've got half of it. I kept a chunk of it, and what I did find is this is Jen from Primal 2.
Show that closer to the camera, because I think no one's seen this before.
That one piece that Mark did to sort of inspire. And I know one of the things we talked about for Primal 2 was the primal worlds, the primal realms blending into the real world. That was going to be one of our big things. So you can see like real world weapons sort of mixing with Ferri, Ferri guys. You can see, scouts and sort of more humans involved. I love this, the Wraith Pit Fighter, like, almost like they've become like, gladiators in an arena because the worlds have kind of blurred together. So many really awesome pieces of art that Mark did to sort of inspire what would have been Primal 2. And I think there's a lot we could have done with that idea of the realms kind of smashing together and creating this kind of hybrid, maybe running out of the real world into, Solum and back into the real world. There's all kinds of cool stuff.
Like, imagine a level set in New York with the Ferri taking over it and stuff. Imagine that.
Imagine if somebody had concepted that somewhere.
Imagine the swamp level. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's people have been saying like they would love a remake. It's never going to happen, unfortunately.
No, I don't. Well, you say that, Andy, right? I never thought like a proper medieval remake would happen because obviously we did. Sony Cambridge did one on PSP, and then I've just forgotten the name. What's that developer that does the remakes and does really good? Oh, I've just forgotten their name. Anyway, another studio did a remake of Medieval, and I remember that being very weird. Personally, I was like, I know that game inside out. I led the QA on that, and we had nothing to do with it. And they did a wonderful job. They did a really good job of reviving it. But I was like, oh, I guess that can happen now. I guess, if Sony wants to reuse the license, they can just get someone else to make the game. They don't need the original people anymore.
I was very happy when the PlayStation system updated and you could choose Scree as one of your avatars on the system.
You say that, the very first day that PS3 came out, Scree was in the list of maybe 15 or 20 avatars, because I remember when I got my PS3, I was like, Scree and Dan are both the earliest avatars for PS3. I was like, holy cow.
When PlayStation, was it Rumble All-Stars, whatever it came out, I was like, oh, here comes Jen. I was like, oh no, damn, okay, never mind. There were a few times like that when I was like, okay, there's something that could happen here. Especially when the PlayStation Portable, PSP, and the PlayStation Vita came out, I was like, oh, like it'd be great to have a portable version of this. I don't know whether you can have a portable unless you get like a Anbernic or something like that,
Yeah, you can't officially.
There's no official way of playing.
Actually,
unless you can do remote. Hang on, the PlayStation Portal.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got my PlayStation Portal right now. I'm wondering actually if
Because I think that would look great on the small screen still.
it would. Yeah, yeah, I'd have to look and see because I think they do. Yeah, all the PS2 classics are streamable, um, as well as as well as downloadable. So
And I bet it would load like so snappy now as well. Like that'd be great. The frame rate would be great as well.
yeah, I don't see it on the streaming games on PlayStation Plus, but I could stream. I guess I could stream it from my PS5. But
Remote play it from your
yeah,
PS5. Yeah.
exactly.
And I guess the last kind of like bit is, have there been any games since that you feel are kind of like spiritual successors to Primal? Because there's one that I definitely feel, and unfortunately that wasn't a particularly well received game, which was Forspoken. Forspoken came out. A girl gets transported into another realm. She has to go along with like the weird people in there to do what she wants, and it had like portal stuff in there. And I was like, God, this feels like Primal. Like spiritually, like the main character was similar. I just felt like it was somebody had played Primal and was then like off to go and do their own thing in a very similar way. But I don't think there's been many games where it's a person, a fish out of water, taken from the real world into a supernatural world.
I mean, I feel like that trope is not new, right? Pulled from the real world and thrown into a strange universe. That's not new. I think the female protagonist with the strange sidekick, I think, is conceptually not that new. But I think the way that we did it, I can't think of many games that have done that.
I can't think of many games where you press select to ask for a hint. I was like, what? What's that system we had in there as well?
That took us so long to do that.
That didn't need to be in there. You would cut that from a schedule
You would,
nowadays.
yeah, but we did it. We did, and we had to hand edit those volumes that would, and update the dialogue to make sure that, as you complete the quest, the next tip would be right, and then in this area it would be this tip, and in that area it would be that tip. That's a great question. I can't really think. I certainly can't think of a game that had outside of GTA 5 or something, right? A game that has like true character switching. I can't think of one that does it like we did it, with that two very distinctly different characters. I can't think of one. And all the stuff that Scree did off screen, like the way he would turn to a statue whenever you're in combat, the way he would go pick up power cells, you could send him to go pick up a power cell, the little crystals, and transform back to Jen. He would finish up, and I remember spending time making sure that worked. He would finish up what he was doing and then catch up so that you didn't have to wait for every action to complete. Right? There was so much stuff we did to try and make sure that it felt, like he was truly autonomous and could do his thing.
I think there's probably, if we did a remake kind of like thing, I think that nowadays you'd maybe want to give him more stuff to do whilst you were in combat, right? Rather than just going and turning into a rock doorstep, essentially. Like nowadays, you would be able to go into a menu, you'd be able to upgrade him in some way, or like you'd be able to craft items like out in the field or something, or upgrade Jen's abilities in some way. I'm sure you'd want to like do that nowadays. Because I was just playing Ragnarok and I was just thinking like Ragnarok is very similar in some ways, right? It's far more,
Of course,
it's
with
far more
Atreus.
linear in the
Yeah,
game, in the actual level design, but in terms of you and Atreus, and you're on a story, and you're moving into basically like arena areas where you then go and fight people. I was like, it does have similarities in what we were doing. It's just that we had far more open areas. Like if I think back at that first level of Solum, like as soon as you come out of the portal, like you go through like a little kind of corridor which we needed for loading, and then you're out into the wilderness, and you could have gone left there if you wanted to. You were supposed to go right, but you could have gone left if you wanted to.
yeah. I remember standing at one press review where we press preview of Primal and getting a lot of questions about that, and we kept talking about this like illusion of freedom, right? We wanted it to feel like this big world that you could go anywhere but was kind of an illusion of how far you could really go. I think at times we landed that. Again, for the era, I think we did okay. Funnily enough, I just threw a chat GPT question just to see what it would come up with of games that are sort of similar to Primal Processor. The two games that it came up with? Enslaved and to a certain extent Hellblade, which I think is a bit of a stretch. But Enslaved, it's fascinating to think that Enslaved is in some way a tried, because the folks that built Enslaved were at Sony when we started Primal. They subsequently left and went and formed their own studio. But Ninja Theory are sort of ex-Sony Cambridge folks, and there is some lineage there between Primal, and literally lineage between Primal, because those folks were working on Primal in the very early days. They
Before
left
they moved on to Ninja Theory,
before they formed their own studio. But yeah, there is some parallels there with Enslaved, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting. God. Well, there we go. I think I'm kind of exhausted with like that, but yeah, it was like a great time to make that game. It took us about 3 years, I feel, maybe 2, 3 years, 3 years. It was a great time to be at Sony. We've both got stories we definitely cannot tell on this on this chat about being there and stuff. It was a PlayStation 3 kind of came in on 24, didn't it? Like when we moved to the new office, PlayStation 3 kind of came in there. But before we got there, we got to obviously Ghost Hunter, which kind of came off the side of Primal.
Well, that was built in parallel. So yeah, like the Medieval 2 team built Medieval 2 and then Ghost Hunter, and the Medieval 1 team kind of the core of Medieval 1, Chris and Katie and folks, they built Medieval 1, helped on Medieval 2, and then went off to do sort of start the work on Primal. So we ended up with Primal and Ghost Hunter running parallel.
And then it was 24 and Medieval Resurrection in kind of like the right by the entrance where the cafeteria was and Street Fighter Alpha 3 was, which constantly it never changed. It would constantly get getting played, that game. So yeah, good memories. It was a good time to be a good time to enter the games industry at that point. Definitely.
It really was. Yeah, it was a fascinating period. Sony was just starting to really peak, right? Sony was really on the up, so it was a really great time to be part of Sony. PS2 was such an incredible leap over PS1. We really were able to push games in ways that we hadn't been able to on PS1. And I stand super proud of, there's so much I would do differently on Primal, and so much I feel like I could have done better now. But it just, what I want to finish with quickly, right, is we're sitting at 73. I'm kind of presently proud of that. Like, I definitely feel like, 22 positive reviews, that ain't bad, for a game that, maybe didn't sell well. And I'm still also super proud of this. 2012, PS2 is one of the first, Primal is one of the first PS2 games to come to PS4 as a classic. This was 2012. And I remember messaging a few folks. I remember messaging Mark Gibbons, and I was living in California at the time, so was he, and we got together, cracked open a beer, and we sat and played it on my PS4, because we were like, I was very genuinely flattered that that it would show up as a classic in the way. Oh yeah, hang on, I'm not showing the right window. That's where you can't see it. I was genuinely flattered that it showed up as what they consider. This is on the PlayStation blog, right? Primal PS2 Classic comes to PSN. I was like, holy cow. Like somebody in Sony, like Scree was on the PlayStation 3 avatars. It's one of the first games that comes to PS2 Classics on PS4. I'm like, somebody in Sony really loves Primal, and I think to make a game that even if a million people didn't buy it, a few 100,000 people truly loved it, I think that's pretty cool.
It's cult classic status, isn't it?
100%, yeah. And I think that's I'm proud of that. For all its warts and for all its flaws, there was something very special about that game, and I don't think, it's hard to make a game like that now in the AAA space. Remember, this was the AAA space at the time. It's hard to make a game like that now, and I'm proud that we were able to, even though there's so much I would do better and differently. I'm proud that we made it, and I'm proud to have all the folks that I got to work on. You know, yourself, Mark, Chris, so many people. You know, I worked so closely with Katie and Robert. You know, there was just so many of us that kind of came together to build that game, and I hold it very special. And it certainly was the making of me as a designer, right? It was my first design role. I did so much wrong. I did some things that were okay, and learned so much going on from that. That you know, it's a seminal moment in my career, and I'm very proud of the game we made.
No, same. It's the reason I went to university wanting to go into movies because that was like, you know, Jurassic Park and Toy Story and stuff like that. And it was when Metal Gear came out, and no, sorry, it was when Final Fantasy VII came out, which was telling stories in games. And I was like, oh no, I should have stuck with my first love, which was games, which is what I used to play in my bedroom when I was a kid, and then going therefore into Primal and being able to tell such great stories that we did do on Primal on 24, like that was awesome. So yeah, it was really kind of fulfilling for me as well. So yeah, but good memories, and I think that can now finally get put to rest now, and like I can die happy now. Yeah, that all that stuff can go into the into storage now, and yeah, maybe we should do another one of these on 24.
I mean, I would love to do one on 24 because there's so many stories on 24, so many things that happen on that. And I just found a video maybe 2 or 3 months ago of somebody going 24 game is not as bad as you thought it was. I was like, yeah. So yeah,
Let's gather our thoughts then, and maybe we'll come back and do that in a future date. So for now, though, like, what games are you playing right now, other than Arc Raiders? Because I think everyone's finished with that game, aren't they?
yeah, I've played a little bit of Arc Raiders. It's fun. I like it. I need to play a bit more of it. I've been playing Sectori, which is basically like Geometry Wars, like a modern day Geometry Wars. It's incredible. I just finished the new Shinobi game, which is awesome. The Art of Vengeance.
The Sideways Vengeance
Yeah,
one.
so good. Loved it. It was like 30 hours, like 25, 30 hours. It's a big game. Really liked it. And then I've got, oh no, Split Fiction. Me and my wife are going to play
Great
that
game.
soon. I've been playing some Battlefield, some Cyberpunk, just, you know, kind of dabbling around. I've actually been playing a lot of retro stuff as well.
So here I was in 2026 saying I'm going to say Cyberpunk as well. Then you mentioned it. Like, yeah, like what's your experience been with that? Because initially I didn't play it because I wanted like a new graphics card and blah 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 and get it playing really good. And then as soon as I got into it, which was probably a year after it had come out, I was like, this is really good. And then it's always on there as like a little world I can just jump back into and play Phantom Liberty and like check out. Like I don't think I've perfectly got my characters cybernetic implants perfectly how I want them and things like that. But it's what a brilliant world they've set there.
Yeah, now it's been patched up because I got it when it first came out and I spent like an hour trying to get it to run at 30 FPS and I was like, this is why I hate PC games. And then the PS5 version came out. I got that and it was patched and I started playing that quite a bit. And then I went back to the PC one after it was patched. And similarly, I've been just kind of diving back and forth into it. Just it's got a lot of some of the stuff I'm working on now. It's kind of got some interesting reference, so it's kind of fun to just play that game through. I haven't played Phantom Liberty yet. I'm sort of saving that. I want to really dive into Phantom Liberty at some point, the expansion. But yeah, it's a fun little game to go back to.
And then I played the Altars for a fair bit, which is it's just lovely. Like me and my wife joke that we both really love lonely people in space stuff. So whether it's like Gravity or Interstellar or any of those, like, or Solaris, we just love kind of like, yeah, just like lonely person in space. And the Altars fits that. It's just like you and you're abandoned, you don't know what to do, and then something happens, right? So yeah, I've been playing that a bunch, as well as Jump Space, which is I'm constantly on the search for a game where you can kind of do a bit of Star Trek. So this is a game where it's a co-op game, and you all jump onto a ship, and then basically you have to basically get from point A on one side of the solar system to point B, and you have to basically jump from planet to planet. So you fly the ship, you fly it from planet to planet, and then you have to do something on a planet. So basically, you walk over to the kind of like the pod thing, and then you just leave the ship and go down to the planet, flying through space. and it's seamless from space down to the ground, where you then do like a bit of Halo, like shooting things. But because it's co-op, one of you can still be in the ship, so they can still be like flying it and maneuvering it like a helicopter and kind of like on the ground, and like the shields have to be stayed up, and there's other people or other opponents, and they're shooting the ship. So the guy back on the ship is like on the comms going, I'm flying it, but I've got no one on the turret. So you're like, hang on a minute, and you go, and you jetpack back up to the ship, and it's all seamless between space and ground, or like in the atmosphere and ground, and it's also stupid. So you're just doing things, you're just like, oh, like just like jumping around, like, like it's just silly. But then when you get back on board, like one of the most memeable things is the person who's like flying the ship. They punch in the coordinates and hit the warp drive thing. Everyone's got to get to their seats before it kicks off, otherwise you die. So so the memeable thing is people just you see their warp driving and they engage, and everyone's like in the cargo bay going, oh, like they're running back to their ships to get into the jump seat before it goes to warp. Really good fun. Like, so I've been playing a few little kind of like co-op games like that, and then the other two are Where Winds Meet, which is that. I mean, what? Why are we making games when there's games like that out there? Like, free to play, massive. It's essentially Ghost of Yotei plus a bit of other games as well. Sandbox, like crazy. Like, that's amazing that those games get made. And then I'm playing my first Yakuza game ever. I've never played a Yakuza game, so I started with Kiwami, which seems to be like the one that is a good one to get into. So yeah, playing the first Yakuza game, which is another kind of like third person, wandering around, punching people kind of thing. I was like, oh wow, okay,
Yes. Big old
yes,
game too.
there we go.
Yeah. So much to play.
Right then, where can people find you? You can find me at Real Andy Tudor, or you can go on Spotify and listen to any of my music and stuff like that. And I'm working on the next FIFA game, which is the FIFA Heroes game. So that'll be out soon. Almost gave it away. We're not allowed to say when it's out soon. It'll be out soon. There's a World Cup coming, so you can probably guess. Yeah, so I'm working on FIFA Heroes at the moment, which is going really well. But yeah, otherwise making music. So yeah, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm mostly on. I'm on most of the socials. Animals. I also do my podcast, Dev to Dev, which is about everyday video game developers and why they do what they do every day. I also sometimes show up on the DLC podcast, which we've both been on. It's my favourite news podcast. I love Jeff and Christian; they're good folks. So, and I do a podcast for their Patreon about game feel, which is what I'm kind of obsessed with, the way games feel and what makes them feel good. And I'm often on their Discord. So yeah, just out and about on social. You can find me on all the usuals except for X. I'm not on X, but I'm on everywhere else.
Cool. Right then, well there we go. Primal. What were we thinking?
What were we thinking? But I'm glad we did.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Bye, buddy. Take it easy.
See you then.